I was born in Long Island, New York, in a little town called Farmingdale. I loved the water from the time I was born, practically. We moved to Merrick, which was one of my favorite places because it was right next to a big pond and then a wetland that led straight to the Great South Bay. And I used to walk through there to the Great South Bay in reeds that were over my head. And I loved it. It was just really beautiful. My father used to go into the water, very shallow, and with his feet find the clams, you know, and then dig them out, and then he'd open them up right there and eat them, right there at the water's edge. And it was a lot of fun. Strangely enough, my mother was more of a nature person, even though she was brought up for the most part in the city. In fact, she had bird books and books of different trees so that she could identify them. When I first moved to California, I worked for a newspaper in Hollywood, and I met Bill out here. An old friend of Bill's, Jan Rader, and her husband, Alan Rader, they lived out here in Playa del Rey, and we came to visit. It was quite remarkable because when you left Culver City and were on Culver Boulevard, it suddenly became black, really dark. There were no street lights. Yeah, until you got all the way into the village of Playa del Rey, you were going through this spooky, dark area. Finally found an apartment over on Montreal Street, and so we moved in. At that time, I had no idea that Ballona was a wetland because it just looked like fields. And my two sons, Willie and Matt, would play out there. And Willie began bringing home all kinds of goodies like snakes and lizards and frogs and all kinds of fun stuff. That's when I first realized that there was something out there more than just dry fields. And by that time, we were thinking about the fact that Howard Hughes had owned this for a long time and that Howard Hughes was not doing too well anymore. We started thinking, uh-oh, you know, what'll happen here? When the marina was built, for example, there was no coastal commission. And I read an article from that period that said that one lone Audubonner got up and said, but this is a place where the birds live and there's all kinds of wildlife here and you can't destroy it. It's a wonderful place for wildlife. And of course, no one paid any attention. And the whole thing was dredged and filled and changed completely. So that's what would have happened here. And so we got together with some neighbors. Jan Rader was one, Virginia Wilson was one, and we started thinking about how we could save this.
In the late 1970s, had as a student Willie Lansford. One time, Willie told me that he would like to introduce his mother to me, Ruth Lansford. And we had something in common, and that was looking and foreseeing the future of Ballona Wetlands and protecting it. So there were about 10 people that got together from Santa Monica College, from the Playa del Rey area at Ruth Lansford's house, and I think we all threw in $10 into a empty coffee can. That was the kitty we started with, and we started a program in Friends of Ballona Wetlands.
Just after we first began getting together, Howard Hughes did die. And within weeks, they announced plans for development. And they were massive, absolutely massive. Everything would be destroyed except for 72 acres of wetland, and then they would cut a major road, Falmouth Avenue, right through that. So the battle began. Summa Corporation, which is Hughes Corporation, said it's just plowed agricultural fields and it's not wetland at all. So Howard Towner, my husband, and Roxanne James, who was vice president of the Friends then, and I went out there with a shovel and took soil samples from the agricultural area and A guy named Bill Smice took pictures of us while we were doing it, and we took it for analysis, and it was wetland soil. And we built our forces, we built our board, and we began to get a lot of publicity. We got publicity in the LA Times, and that certainly helped us a lot. Dr. Howard Towner and Ken Dial from Loyola Marymount, Walter Sakai joined us. They were extremely important to us because of their wonderful science background along with Ed. And they organized a terrific walking tour along Ballona Creek, which looked right down into the wetlands. And we had crowds because most people didn't even know that the wetlands were there. We were all excited by the publicity, the LA Times, local TV stations, all of these things were happening. And then some of the wiser reporters really caught on.
The future of the Ballona Wetlands is now in the hands of the courts. If it is destroyed, it'll be gone forever. In the meantime, the Friends of Ballona Wetlands continue to conduct their monthly tours of this California treasure. At first glance, it looks like just a big, empty field.
Mud, that's what it looks like, right. But it's not empty, it's teeming with wildlife. And people learn that, and I think in the process of learning that, they'll be saving them in the future because they'll understand their value now.
Now, is this snake endangered out here in the wetlands?
It's not endangered. What's endangered is the wetlands. And as long as we remove wild areas from Southern California and develop them, then this...
He wouldn't have anywhere to go.
No.
Now, what are those big birds out there?
The large gray-blue ones you're seeing are great blue herons. If the wetlands were to disappear, we would not be seeing great blue herons, perhaps except as accidental visitors along the muddy borders of canals and things like that.
The whole purpose of these tours is that people from the youngest to the oldest learn that this is a natural resource that we cannot afford to lose. And then they'll pass it on to other people, and then these places will have a much better chance to survive in the future. That's what it's all about.
We were on television, and once you're on television, everybody knows you. So that really increased our base of support. We had contacted the Center for Law and the Public Interest. An attorney named Josephine Poe, and a man named Carlisle Hall took on the case. It was a pro bono situation because we had no money. And she was magnificent. She and Carlisle together were an unbeatable team.
The governor's office, Governor Deukmejian at the time, had really seemed to fudge the numbers and change the definition of what a functioning wetland was in fairly significant ways, so that a much smaller portion of the site was being deemed wetlands rather than a great deal of the site. And we felt that that was a legal claim that needed to be heard and could be successful. It turned out that was the case.
Ruth and the Friends and a group that I and Mel Nutter were in called the League for Coastal Protection joined the Friends and the League of Women Voters and filed a lawsuit, which we were told almost from the beginning we had no chance to win.
The first thing the brand new developers said to me was they came in with the representative from the State Attorney General's office and the city attorney and their own attorney, and they all said, this pending case, this lawsuit by the Friends, is a loser. The first thing we have to do is get this thing kicked out of court. And I said, excuse me, I bet you think you're going to get a development agreement, don't you? And they said, well, of course, we have to have a development agreement. And I said, no, you're not going to get a development agreement. But gee whiz, if there were a court order and a settlement, my hands would be tied, wouldn't they? And the developers were smart enough to recognize that that was a good deal for them.
And so the settlement gave us 340 acres that we knew were saved for sure. And it was only one more step to getting the rest. And the Trust for Public Land was brought in. Ruth Galanter played a very strong role in this. And when the Trust for Public Land came in, the next task was getting all these, now we had burgeoning Ballona Wetlands organizations all over the place, not just the Friends, but other organizations, was to get them together and to make them realize that this was the one and only chance we had to make sure that the whole wetland was saved. And that, of course, depended on the voters, and the voters did it. They elected Gray Davis. This is really part of Gray Davis's legacy, and he should be very much appreciated for what he accomplished here. I look back in the beginning and I think of so many people who made such a difference, the real core of the heart, I should say, of our organization. And among those, I think of Roxanne James, who was a real spark plug. Boy, she never gave up. She was a real fighter, and she made sure that I had confidence too. She was a big help in that department. Dear Dr. Howard Towner, we miss him so terribly. It was such a shame that we lost him. He was always not only a superb scientist, but always the mediator, always the person when there were conflicts on the board who could solve those conflicts, coming up with creative solutions. And we miss him so much, I can't say. And dear Mary Thompson. Mary Thompson was the mother of the dune restoration. It would never have happened without Mary. And she was also a superb artist. She was the whole soul of the dune restoration. And Jan Rader was with us from the day we began, and she kept our books, and she sternly told us what we shouldn't do and how to do what we should do, and warned us about our financial difficulties, and was generous and thoughtful and helpful, and again, served with us until she passed away. And there are so many who are still with us, like Ed Tarvid. I mean, right from the very beginning, he's been just terrific, and we've depended on him. And Tim Rudnick, who is our Venice representative, who always came up with wonderful ideas and was always willing to get in his wetsuit and dive right into the creek. And Walter Sakai, who led tours and was very articulate, and Roger Cobb, who was very good on tours and very funny. People like Bill Beebe approached us. Bill Beebe was a very well-known photographer, professional photographer, who spent so much time in the wetland. I think he's the only one who ever got the picture of the immature bald eagle that was here for a short visit. And he took this marvelous pictures of the least terms. And Kent Strumpel, who faithfully recorded every event that we had and who generously gave us all his material that he'd kept over the years about the wetlands. Now the Friends, now that the major controversy is over, now that the wetlands are saved, and now that the Conservancy and the Science Advisory Board are all planning the restoration, which I hope they will do quickly, we are entering a new phase ourselves. And we have a paid staff now, Otella Rock, who is superb. I mean, the office, we couldn't do without Otella. And Kelly Rose, who's been running our restoration program. We've expanded our board. We have a new board that's really almost scary. It's so good, and I'm so happy with them all. I'm really excited about all the new programs. We're having one after the other, that is one more exciting than the next. Creative, imaginative things are happening. We've had over 55,000 volunteers out there, and it's growing every day. And on top of that, we're working on the Discovery Park, which will be east of Lincoln, and will be a beautiful, really interactive, exciting, and fun place for kids and adults to learn the ABCs of a wetland and also the cultural history of this area. So that will be the place where people will go before they actually explore the wetland. I was so excited to see that the least tern, which is our little emblem, you know, our little logo, the California least tern, has found the freshwater marsh and is having a ball out there foraging for fish constantly. It's just, to watch them is amazing. And So that's been very, very important to us. Now we're just waiting for its connection to the salt marsh, and that'll be more exciting. We have been always the primary organization at the Ballona Wetlands, but now I think we're reaching a new level of respect, not only in the community here, but everywhere. If I ask myself, was it worth it? It certainly was. It was for me, and I think it certainly was for the Ballona Wetlands.